And welcome back in, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Another edition here of Fridays with Phillip. This is episode 2, bringing in our Marshall. And y'all's response was great last week. We thought it was a really fun episode, and we're excited to keep some things rolling here. And so Phillip and Ronnie join us once again. Ronnie Sanders, our publisher, as well. Phillip, I know you appreciated all the kind words on the message board. That's not the only thing you were in the Twitter news for this week about message boards, but we'll focus on that one instead. How about that?
Yeah, what's it called? Message board geniuses or something like that.
Yeah, it's a Hall of Fame, really.
It's they took issue that I said that Lincoln Riley hadn't really developed all these quarterbacks. He got them, Hurts and Baker Mayfield, etc. And I guess there's some Lincoln Riley fans up there or something. I don't know, but and several of our erstwhile posters subscribers agreed with him. Said I had it coming. So there you go.
I will say, Phillip, there was a thread on On3 this morning that said these people need to learn some respect for Phillip. And I said, that's right. You're getting some rivalry message board support there. So there you go.
Well, I'll tell you this. I quit worrying a long time ago about what somebody says on Twitter about me. So I hope they had a good time with it.
That's the way to go. That's the way to go. Well, we've got a handful of topics we want to get through today, guys. But we sort of teased it last week. Phillip, you had a great conversation with Auburn softball. Half of Auburn softball's new head coaches, because obviously it'll be a double head coach situation, and then they got introduced this week. Phillip, just tell us a little bit more about the comments they made upon their introduction, and maybe what you learned a little bit this week about them.
I was impressed. I think I came away with a little bit better understanding of what being co-head coaches in this case really is, and I think in the softball part of it, the on-field part of it, he'll be basically the head coach. But I do think they intend to do it together, and she was very impressive. She was Kate, very impressive, very outgoing, uh, and uh, and both of them very excited to be at Auburn. They really clearly are, and you know they talked about it's going to be hard. It's going to be different for the players. And Chris really is viewed as one of the top hitting coaches around, and he says Riker Chasen, the pitching coach that they hired, is in his mind the best pitching coach in the country. That's not me saying that. I don't know if that's true, but he is very highly thought of. I know that, and I kind of was joking with Chris after it was over, and I said, "Well, you probably don't have to win it all your first year." I said, "Second year will probably be enough." And, he laughed, and but they seem very excited, very eager. They got 2 young kids. It's going to be interesting, and they obviously are. You know, John Colwood said the synergy is amazing between them, and it seemed that way. And it's going to be interesting to see. I'm sure they're going to have to work through some things. I mean, they've seen this done. It's taught at Tennessee. It's been done at Washington. It was being done at Louisiana when he was there, and but they're going to have to kind of figure it out as they go in some ways. I'm sure. And the real challenge to me, and I don't really know exactly how they have. I mean, they got a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter, and who are very cute, and very sweet, and also very excited wearing their Auburn stuff. But they don't seem to think that kind of stuff's going to be any problem. They are big into when they talk about they want it to be a family, I don't think that's just talk. I think that really is the way they want it to be. And so we'll see. I think there was a very positive vibe as opposed to 7 years ago when Mickey Dean was hired and the the scandal really was still ongoing, and it was just not a real happy time for Auburn softball, despite the fact that he had taken Auburn softball where it had never been. And but there was nothing like that. It was all positive and upbeat, and we'll see. Well, I mean, like every other coach or coaches, it depends on what happens on the fields. We'll see.
Now, DJ Sanders is Philip. I know you reported on that. So,
Right.
what other assistant spots? And you mentioned the pitching coach. Well, what other assistant spots they have to fill?
That's it. You
That's
got
it.
four
They're done.
four full time coaches,
There you go.
and so it's the two of them, and Riker and her. That's it. Nobody's coming back from the previous staff.
From a player standpoint, Philip, how many players for those who aren't as informed? How many did they lose in the portal? And
Well, they only lost one of consequence, which was Annabelle Weidra. I've heard nothing about anybody else planning on leaving. I asked him if they planned on everybody staying, and his response was that, you know, we're going to work hard. We're going to work every day. We're going to do these things, and if they're all into that, then let's go. So I think to me, he was kind of leaving an opening there to say if you don't buy in, then we're going to move on from you, whoever that it might be. But everything I hear is that the players are pretty excited. I think they really, as a player's dad put it to me, they want to have a hitting coach that they trust and that they can teach them how to hit. And bluntly, they don't feel like they've had that the last few years, and that's shown. They haven't hit the ball much.
Philip, from an overall softball standpoint, what are the plans for facility upgrades and those types
Well,
of
I
things?
think all facility upgrades, Ronnie, right now are kind of in limbo. I saw where Ole Miss they had some kind of big project planned, and they squelched it. I mean, I don't think anybody really has a grasp of how they're going to deal with what's to come. It's it's going to be one of the more interesting times ever in college athletics. I think that the SEC, the Big Ten schools, particularly the more prominent ones, Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma, they are going to find a way to do whatever they have to do for football. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And right now you're looking at a situation where if you're paying $22 million for players and you got about a $30 million hit for the next 10 years to help pay off the house settlement, assuming the judge approves it, that's $52 million. But then again, as a friend of mine put it to me yesterday, who is involved in NIL and such another place, said that, yeah, that's $52 million. And if you're at Auburn, that means you still got $150 million left after you do that. And there's some truth to that, except that money's all spoken for. So what are you going to do? Are you going to start cutting staff? Are you going to eliminate sports? Because the other parts of this settlement that haven't gotten much attention is that that all scholarships, whatever the the squad limit is, will be full scholarships, or they can be full scholarships. So that's going to get more expensive in that way. But so then, which you're going to have to decide which sports are the most important to you, other than football and men's basketball, who are going to get what they need. I should have said that earlier, men's basketball too. And but which ones are important enough to you to fully fund them and have the full complement of scholarships and all those things, and which ones aren't. And you know, the truth is that for instance, the Auburn golf team just won the national championship, and that was great, and it was fun to watch, and people were excited about it and proud about it, and all those things. But it didn't make any money, and the same thing goes for a lot of other sports. My guess would be that baseball will be funded to the max, and softball will be funded to the max, and obviously football and men's basketball, and everybody else. For example, they also introduced the women's tennis coach, the new women's tennis coach, on that same day, and he said recruiting in tennis isn't just in just nationwide; it's worldwide. And he said, "I've already been overseas twice, and I'm going again this week." Well, you have to wonder how much longer that's going to last, uh, because again, it's great to have a great tennis program, and anytime anybody's contending for championship, people get interested in it, but it still doesn't make any money, and money is what this is going to all be about. And I think I think it's unfortunate myself. I think that, and I know I'm in the minority on this. People in our business, but I think the players had it pretty good already, and I think most of the players thought they had it pretty good. Now, once you start waving that money around, sure they won't it. But I don't. I think the notion of exploiting football players is ridiculous, honestly. And uh, and they say, how can you be amateurs? How can you be amateurs if the coach is making $10 million a year? Well, I don't get that. I don't get that narrative. An amateur, if you're an amateur athlete, you're an amateur athlete. Doesn't have anything to do with how much the coach makes. But I think most people, and me included, don't have any problem with them getting money. But this is just out of control, wild, wild west stuff. And it's really not just NIL; it's NIL combined with penalty-free transfers, and it's just become it's like if the NFL said tomorrow, I said we don't have any more rules. You can sign whoever you want to, whenever you want to. You can just leave and go to another team anytime you get ready to.
Philip, where do you see this going? I mean, are
Yeah.
these players going to be employees? How does this affect collectives? Do they want to be employees? I mean, where do you see this heading?
I think there's some serious question, and I'm sure that some would say yes, but from all I've heard, most of them don't want to be employees. And there was one of these outfits that's representing players. I don't remember which one it was that said they had they were stopping pushing for players becoming employees because they had talked to their clients and they didn't want to be employees. So, but I just don't know. I think making them employees that would cost you even more money. And but how's that going to work? I mean, if you're an employee, you can be fired. You can be fired for lack of performance if you're an employee. So you were the quarterback, and we signed you, and we're giving you $100,000 a year, and uh, but your fourth team say, I'm sorry, we don't have a place for you anymore, And do they want that? I don't know. But I know that I've heard for a good while here, Auburn's been giving, and a lot of other people have been giving 4-year scholarships. That at least in some sports, they've stopped doing that, and it's just a 1-year scholarship. And but that's the whole equivalency sports thing is going to change if everybody has full scholarships to give. But on the same time, just like with the $22 million, there's no rule that says you got to spend that much, and you don't have to do that. You don't have to give all these people full scholarships, but it's going to be a fact where if you want to compete for championships, you got to do that. And in equivalency sports, we'll use softball for an example. If you're going to compete with Oklahoma and Texas and Alabama and LSU and Texas A&M and all those schools, then you're going to have to do what they do. And if you don't, you won't. And I think there's probably going to be some sports where they decide, well, we're just not going to do it there. I
Now,
don't think softball would be one of those, which is why a lot of people wanting to get in this league, or one of the reasons a lot of people want to get in this league.
I know I've seen Greg Byrne from Alabama was the one who was very outward in expressing concern over, what's going to happen to non-revenue type sports. I'm interested to talk to John Cohen about that next week. But do you think, realistically, at a program like Auburn, Phillip, that's built up and in the SEC, do you think there could be a reality where some of those sports are in danger of being cut because, like you said, the money has to come from somewhere to make up for the revenue sharing?
And again, this is just, I doubt that they're in danger of being cut about being just, you don't have it anymore. But I mean, I think that there'll be some that are in danger of not being what they would consider fully funded, like with a full maximum number of scholarships and all those things. And there are some sports, golf, equestrian, tennis to an extent, though there's so many foreign players in there, it's hard to say, where there's a lot of athletes on scholarship that don't really need the scholarship. They come from well-off families, but could there be a situation where they say we're going to base scholarships on need in some of these sports? I don't know. Nobody said that. It's just something I thought about. What'd you say, Ronnie?
How do collectives play into this?
Well, that's going to be another interesting thing. I think what the schools want, most of them, is to bring the collectives in house, and the collectives will just be kind of the vehicle through which they're sharing the money. And but it's amazing when there's big money involved. How long? Nobody heard of collectives 2 years ago, and now you've got all these companies like Learfield and these and that and other, and agencies that are all into it, and they say no, you can't get rid of collectives. I don't know if you can. I don't know, and there's going to be a case where we're going to say, okay, here's what we're going to pay you, and so if you want anything else, if you want more NIL money or whatever, then go get it. Go find you somebody that'll give it to you, because we're not involved.
Yeah.
I don't know. And here's the thing. I don't think anybody knows. I asked John Cohen on Tuesday, just kind of joking around. I said, how are you going to pay for all this stuff? And he just kind of shook his head and he said, I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. However, having said all that, like my friend said, you can't make it work with you paid your $52 million and you still got $150 million. You can't make it work with that? That's a good question. I don't know. I do know that there seems to be And I think some judges and legislators and everybody else thinks all these programs are just sitting there with a huge bucket of money, and all they got to do is just reach in there and grab some, do whatever they want to. And that really is not the case. Uh, it is running an entire athletic program and trying to compete at a high level is an expensive proposition.
Well, even Freeze said himself last month. I don't think he used the word donor fatigue explicitly, but like that's what he was referencing, saying these people also
Yeah.
pay for your suites and they help pay for these facilities. Now, I think the revenue sharing can help take some off of that. But like you said, Philip, like with the NIL collective, I think the court document said something about they're going to incentivize, like the NCAA is going to incentivize you to continue using in-house collectives. I think their ultimate goal is maybe get these back to their original purposes, which is helping athletes benefit off their likeness, helping stuff like taxes, things like that. Whereas nowadays, everyone just views NIL as a vessel to get more money to the players. So I am interested to see
Well,
maybe
now,
how it evolves.
they a few weeks ago they said that that the schools could advise them about NIL deals and all that stuff. The way Rich McGlynn put it to me was, he said, right now we can do everything except pay them the money ourselves. He said we can help them do their taxes. We can do all those things, and so which is definitely going to be needed. But the
Mhm.
problem is you get all these agents involved, and I get one of the interesting things to me that well, it's interesting in our business altogether. The seemingly desire to give other people at other outlets credit for things, like if you confirm a story and then you say it was first reported by so and so. I'm not sure why we do that, but I'm not talking about us specifically. I'm talking about it in general. And if you know it to be true, I'm not sure why Auburn Undercover needs to give ESPN credit. I don't quite get that, but and the reason I bring that up is because now you're seeing stories that say the last sentence of the story is say there'd be about an NIL deal somebody got. In the last sentence of the story, it'll say it was negotiated by so and so and so and so with such agency. Which what that tells me is they're trying to make sure whoever they know with that agency is happy and will give them another story later on. But but for the most part, I don't think that it is. I think a lot of the dollar figures are probably not accurate. And what my friend who I mentioned earlier, who is involved at actually two other schools and in the NIL stuff, he said, what's really dangerous, he said, and this is I think more true in basketball than football. He said you got coaches that are promising players stuff whether they got the money or not. And here's the thing: if you say, okay, we're going to give you X amount of dollars, it's not like we're going to write you a check for that much. It's by the month per month usually. And so if and I don't know that Auburn's doing that. So let's say Bruce Pearl does that. Well, if he gets to a point and all of a sudden he says, "Oh heck, I don't have enough money to pay this kid what we're supposed to," there's people he'll be able to call and say, "Look, I got to have some help," and he'll get it. But that's not always true for everybody, and I expect that's true for most head football coaches. I expect that if Hugh Freeze said, "I promised Cam Coleman this much a month, and we're running short. I need you to help us out," and he'll probably be able to find somebody to help him out. And but I just think right now, and I mean, and then you got the other craziness going on. I mean, getting sued by the 1983 North Carolina State basketball team. Are you kidding me? And even more, are you kidding me? LSU, Les Miles is suing LSU for doing what the NCAA told them to do. and because he can't get in the Hall of Fame. Crazy.
It's a different world.
Nick Saban said a few weeks ago he didn't think the downfall of college football was going to be paying players. He said the downfall is going to be if they keep getting multiple major lawsuits every single year. I think he's got a decent point.
I think that is a fair point, and that's why I put something in my e-scenes today about this that they talk about eliminating walk-ons in football at least, and the coaches are obviously extremely against it to the point that in Destin, the coaches unanimously agreed to tell the conference, the presidents, whatever, that whatever the extra cost is for paying walk-ons, they'd pay it out of their salary. And what they were told in response was, this isn't about that. This is about lawsuits. And there, and obviously you've got, and I'm not anti-lawyer like a couple of lawyers on our board accuse me of being. I'm really not. But my best friend's a lawyer, or one of my best friends. But you got lawyers circling around here and agents and whatever, and they see the NCAA as it's like circling around the carcass. They just look for reasons to come up with that they can file a lawsuit. I mean, when you can say the 1983 North Carolina State team is being exploited, which is what was said in the file, it's being exploited. How much do you think Derek Wittenberg and those guys got as a result of being part of that team after they left? I guarantee you that they were well taken care of. And, and I've told other people this, and this is one of the things that I find disturbing. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, everybody I know who played college athletics, particularly college football, says it was the greatest experience of their lives and they'd do it again.
Yep.
And yet, and this person said to me, I said that to my friend, and he said, well, that doesn't matter. I said, why doesn't it matter? He said, because, and he goes back, coaches are making this much money, this and that and the other. So I don't know. I don't know. The only good thing about them becoming employees would be the potential to have collective bargaining. But then would come the fight among all these quote student athlete advocates unquote who really are trying to get their hands on money, fighting over who's going to represent them, who's going to be their guy. And you got in the FBS, you got like 11 or 12,000 scholarship football players. And how you going to get all those people together to agree on anything? And then they say, well, it'll be good for them. Well, it won't be good for them for long because they're temporary. They're going to be gone in 4 years. At least as it stands today, unless some brilliant judge decides they ought to be able to play forever if they want to. But I don't know how you do that. I really don't. Even though I do believe collective bargaining in the end is one way out of this mess.
Well, Phillip, considering the state of we've talked about this in the past, the state of journalism and the state of college athletics, and this wasn't on our list to discuss, but I'm interested in your thoughts. Story came out yesterday that Pat McAfee may not be back on College Game Day. We know Nick Saban is going to be on College Game Day, but I've got my own thoughts, but I'd like to get yours.
Well, I'm not a Pat McAfee fan.
I'm shocked.
You might not be surprised to know. I'm not a fan of yelling and hollering and cursing and all that stuff. I'm just not a look at me. Everybody look at me. Look at me. I'm a hair rolled he is man going around in a tank top and wanting everybody's to see my muscles, and I'm not a fan of that stuff. So, and plus I've never heard him say anything that I found to be particularly compelling. But I haven't heard him say much because I don't watch college game. I haven't watched college game day in a while when it became more about personalities and less about what's coming up in football. But what little I watched Pat McAfee did not make me want to watch anymore. So
Personal
I think
opinion.
Nick Saban will be outstanding in that role.
So do I.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure it'll grate on some Auburn people, but I mean, he is a very thoughtful, very knowledgeable guy. He knows what he's talking about, and he's not trying to say, "Everybody, look at me and look how great I am," like Pat McAfee is. So, if I was them, I wouldn't bring him back.
Well, from my
And
standpoint,
also, that's not journalism. There is nothing even remotely related to journalism that Pat McAfee does. Not even remotely.
addition by subtraction.
Yeah. You knew that. I don't know why you had to ask. You had how I feel about Pat McAfee.
Tell us some recruiting stories.
Oh my. You know, one of my favorite recruiting stories was in basketball, and it came from Sonny Smith. And he had this guy, this player. I'm not going to name him, but he had this player. He basically had him hid out in a hotel room because the next day was signing day. And he said, the kid told him, said, "Coach, I need some beer." So he goes dutifully and gets a 6-pack of beer, brings it back. They're sitting there. He's on one bed, the player's on the other bed, watching TV, and the news comes on. And the lead to the sports news is that this kid is committed somewhere else. And he said, he looked at him, he said, the kid just shrugged his shoulders and smiled. And he went somewhere else. And but my favorite one that I've told several times before is that when Tucker Frederickson was going on his official visit to Auburn, he picked up the wrong bag at the airport, one that looked just like his, and didn't know it. And so they get to Sewell Hall or wherever they went then, and he puts the bag down, and when he does, it pops open, and like 3 whiskey bottles come rolling out. Three bottles of whiskey come rolling out, and he said Bobby Hunt, who was a quarterback, and they all played both ways in those days. But Bobby Hunt was a quarterback and defensive back who played as a defensive back in the NFL for like 10 years, playing the first Super Bowl. But anyway, he said he looked at that and looked at the coach and said, "Coach, this is what we've been needing. We need more guys like this." But I think it's used to be a little. I mean, look, it's always been. I had a guy in Abbeville, an old man in Abbeville, older than me, a lot older than me actually, who told me a story. He went to Auburn. He played at Auburn, and his daddy had gone to Auburn and actually had played with John Heisman or for John Heisman. But anyway, he said Alabama assistant coach came and knocked on his door and said, "Here's the keys to this car." Said, "Just come to Alabama and it's yours." And he said, "I didn't want to go to Alabama, so I told him no." Well, I actually, I wrote about that in my book 20 years ago, and I also mentioned it in a column uh, back in our early days, and apparently it upset Alabama people when our friend Shannon Terry requested that I take it down because I was accusing Alabama of cheating like 70 years ago, which I thought was kind of crazy.
You
But
can't take it out of the book, so what are you gonna do?
but uh, that's but they used to do a lot of stuff, hiding guys out and all that stuff, and it used to be wild. You know, Walter Gilbert, who is Auburn's first All-American center, and the way they used to recruit, they'd just get in the car and drive for days to various places, and they'd heard about Walter Gilbert, and so they went by to see him at his house and told him who he was and this and that and the other. And they said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Oh, I'm coming to Auburn. I've always been coming to Auburn." And that was it. That was but Irk Russell, one of the all-time great guys. Did you know him, Ronnie?
I did not.
Irk Russell. Well, he's from Hensley, which is in Birmingham originally. And he was a big-time prospect in the 1940s. And he had never considered really going anywhere but Alabama. And he said that the Auburn coaches came by and he told them that. They said, "Well, no. Said, "Come on, we're going to show you why not." So they go off and they go fishing. They spend the next 3 days fishing and hunting and doing all this stuff that he loves to do. And then they take him back to Auburn, and he said, "Well, I think I want to go to Auburn." And he did. And but one last story. When Frank Mordecai, remember Frank Mordecai, running back at Vanderbilt?
I don't.
Man,
but
you're young. You're
I know.
young, right?
Phil, continue your story. Nathan's going to be on with you. I've got to run to practice, but y'all keep going. I'll catch up with y'all later.
All right, man.
I don't remember Frank for what it's worth.
Anyway, Frank Mordecai, Nathan, was a great running back in Florida, and he ended up going to Vanderbilt, and the P.W. Underwood, the late P.W. Underwood, was recruiting him for Vanderbilt, and he's at the house where Mordecai's there, and P.W. is there talking to. I don't know if it was his daddy or his mother's boyfriend or husband or whatever, but the man in his life, and anyway, and at the same time, a Florida assistant coach comes by, and he said because PW had been drinking some kind of old rock gut whiskey with the daddy or the man, and this Florida coach comes by and the guy offers him a drink, and he says, no. He said, you know, at Florida we drink Chivas Regal. Well, PW, and you'd have to know PW, picks up the bottle that they've been pouring the drinks out of, and just gulps down about five swallows of it, puts the bottle down, and said, "That tastes just fine to me." At which time Frank Mordecai's daddy told the Florida coach, "You need to leave." PW said he had to excuse himself and go throw up. But it's the recruiting trail used to be even crazier than that.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I wasn't, I've only been around for a few years now doing this, but even in that time, things have changed in a big way from the recruiting perspective. But I think something that's always going to, from the helping out Christian and Jason and being there at the facility, it's never going to change a 16-year-old, getting that insight from a college coach or getting praise from a college coach or his high school coach in a 7-on-7. And that just kind of that thing still lights you up. And it's still something that I think, regardless of how big of a star you are as a high school prospect, they're still kids at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
they're still going to like the things that
Yeah, and there's
that
all
kids
those things,
like.
just like talking about all these 7-on-7s and combines and all this stuff. And there didn't used to be any of that, and it was different. But the one thing that hasn't changed about recruiting is you still better get good players. If you're going to win, that's where it starts.
Well, and we can talk next week. I know we wanted to hit on it today, but we past time a little bit. We'll talk next week about what Auburn is doing in recruiting and kind of if that's the direction. Of course, it is the direction they need to go if they want to compete for championships under Freeze. But just this staff, Phillip, is really just kind of getting after it. And me and Christian were talking about it the other day. They get a guy like Eric Winters. He's the number 34 player in the country. And it just kind of felt like an expected outcome. It was like, oh, they're leading for this guy. And then they get him. Like, that's a top 50 player in the country. A couple years ago, they would have been losing their minds to get somebody like that.
Well, there's no doubt, and really Hugh Freeze and these guys, from my perspective, look like they're just relentless, and that's really where Hugh Freeze became known, was recruiting, and obviously I think now he's got his staff where he wants to, and it's just more comfortable all the way around for everybody, and it showed. I mean, they're not going to get everybody. I think sometimes the fans get all up. They would now they're all about the quarterback that's committed to USC. But and if they get him, that'll be great. And but if they don't, that'll be okay too.
I mean, it was just a couple months ago that people didn't really think this was a possibility. And
Right.
they have good contingency plans at quarterback, but it does go to show too, Phillip. And I've had this conversation with people. I do wonder if, and we'll get into this more next week, but like I feel like they've set up such a great baseline. Even the offensive line, it's like if they get another top 100 recruit, it'll be one of their best rated offensive line classes in the last like 10 years. Obviously, that's not hard to top because they haven't done a very good job of that. But it seems like everything is being so well set up elsewhere. But you got to have your quarterback. Like to win today in college football, really to win most times in college football, you have to have that dynamic quarterback. And we'll see if Peyton Thorne can get him a couple more wins this year. But I do think this class in 26, getting a dynamic, high-level quarterback that you feel confident about in the future, and Walker White could develop into that as well. He's the number 5 quarterback in the country. It's just going to be so important. I just don't think developing NFL talent at other places is going to get you to 11, 12 wins unless you have somebody who can kind of take your offense to the next level. But we'll see.
And the offensive line is so, you won't find many, if any, great offensive teams that don't have an outstanding offensive line. I mean, to me, that's where it all begins. And that's what has been mystifying to me. It was mystifying when Gus was at Auburn, and it was even more mystifying. I think Carson signed like 3 offensive linemen in 2 classes. And this notion that I think Gus just thought once they didn't have to sit out anymore, or that he could just go get him out of the transfer portal and not have to mess with it. And that's not, I'm not saying that you can't get him out of the transfer portal, but but the thing about that is, I mean, they got a couple of good ones out of the transfer portal last year, but they're not around for long. And I think offensive linemen also are more understanding of the reality, most of them, that they're going to have to be developed. They're not going to walk in and be the starting right tackle or right guard or left tackle or whatever. They're not going to probably walk in and be the starter right away.
Yeah, I mean, look at Auburn this year. They didn't lose an offensive lineman in the portal this entire cycle.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
it's you got to stick, like you have to stick around, and also it's got the advantage too if there's 5 guys who can play at once. I mean, it just feels very different. I was talking to Jason about this the other day. This is still, I did that story on what are the most talented positions on the roster, and that's all recruiting based. There's lots of caveats. It's not an exact science, but it's June. But offensive line technically is the least talented by recruiting rating. And yet this feels like the best two deep they've had on the offensive line in like 5 or 6 years.
Well, I think that, and coaches have told me this, that offensive line is the hardest position to evaluate and coming out of high school, because most of the guys you're interested in recruiting have just overwhelmed opponents. You know, if you weigh 320 and you're playing against a 175-pound defensive tackle, you're probably gonna win. You're probably gonna beat it. But and there's always a lot of offensive linemen that aren't necessarily 5 stars or 4 stars or whatever. But it's going to be interesting. I think that you know, I think if they can keep recruiting like they are, and I have no reason to believe they won't, that they'll get to where they want to be.
They'll certainly have the talent to do so, and I think
Yeah.
that's all that Freeze has really asked for. Like his realist's approach that he's had since taking this job really just seems like he's kind of low blood pressure into everything. Just like, look, this is how it is. I think it's really in a year or so we're gonna see. All right, they gave him the time he needed. He recruited how he needed to. Now, what can he do with it? So it'll definitely interesting. Year two, we talked about this last show, but like year two is so interesting too because I don't think they have to be super good this year, but they just need to keep recruiting, and I think they need to show a little bit of proof of concept on the field of these changes we've made are going to work. And Freeze himself saying, I can make changes in a year's time and they can turn into good stuff.
I think that they need to be better, like you said. They obviously don't need any kind of meltdown like they had against New Mexico State last year. I mean, by any measure, that's one of the worst losses probably ever at Auburn, to be honest with you. And to play that poorly against New Mexico State and then a week later play that well against Alabama, I mean, you didn't have to play that well against New Mexico State. You just had to play well enough to win. And to get beat like that was crazy. But I think there were staff issues. I think a lot of things, and I'll be surprised if this team's not better. And the biggest thing to me is, does it look better, regardless of the record? Does it look better? And,
yeah, not all 6 and 6s are made the same.
Right, exactly. And it's going to be tough. Obviously, the schedule's tough, but having 5 straight home games to start the season, that can be a benefit if you can win them. You got a lot of momentum rolling into the second half of the season.
Yep, I remember before the 2022 season under Harsin, we were talking to a staff member, and they had some non-con games. They had Penn State, Missouri, and LSU were the Power 5 games. They also started with 5 straight. And this coach told us, like, if we don't start 4-1 or better, probably toast, because you have to take advantage of that. They lose Penn State, and then they get a miracle win against Missouri, and they completely blew the game against LSU. Now, I think that year would have been over anyway. But like you said, if you're 5-0 and you beat Oklahoma, that's a really, really good ground to stand on going into you're away from home for all of October.
And even if you're 4-1 and didn't beat Oklahoma, I think you're still
yep.
right.
I agree.
But you just can't, you have to give people reason to hope. And recruiting is certainly giving people reason to hope. But it's also, fans aren't always the smartest. I mean, however great Cam Coleman is this coming up season, he won't be as good as he's going to be. I mean, he's still a freshman, and he's still going to have stuff to learn.
Yeah.
So
and he probably doesn't need to be I sit in a situation where I think if he's got these insane stats, I don't know how good that is for them because I think it needs to be a balance. It doesn't need to just be chuck it to Cam Coleman every play because
Right.
he's a really good
Yeah,
player.
I agree. I agree because one thing, if you do that, then you might make it hard on yourself, to recruit because people say, you're going to always throw it to him. But I want to come there.
Yeah, exactly.
But that'd be. I look forward to seeing him play now. I won't deny that. And
Oh, yeah.
but it'll be an interesting year. I wouldn't be surprised if they could win 7 or 8 games. I wouldn't be surprised if they're scuffling around that 6-6 mark again. But as I said, the big thing is, do they look like a team that's going somewhere?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Philip, this was a lot of fun once again.
Always.
And I'm really looking forward to next week. So we appreciate everybody who tuned in to if you're watching the live stream here on Friday morning, then we appreciate you tuning in. If you're listening to the podcast, go and subscribe. And 10 a.m. on Friday is when this thing goes live every week, guys. So you can head to the Auburn Undercover YouTube channel and watch it live, or you can listen on your podcast feed. So, Philip, thanks a bunch, and we will catch you next week.
All right.